our intellect is the power that processes this. You know, we think about things. And really our intellect, a lot of times, presents us with a palette of choices. And from that palette of choices, I didn't write this very well, it is our will that chooses. Okay, so things come in through the senses, they go to the intellect, and then from the intellect, the will chooses. So the will is the power that God has given us to choose. That's how we normally work as humans. We do this 10,000 times a day, this little process right here, without even thinking about it. You know, we sense things in, we think about it, and we choose. All the time. All the time. What am I going to have for dinner? Which clothes, you know, what clothes am I going to wear? Blah, 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 blah. We do it unconsciously, without even thinking about it. So faith, we're told, is an act of the will. We choose to believe God. And this act of faith is an act of trust and an act of obedience. So if we are responding to what God has revealed about himself, that response is an act of trust, right? Because we're saying, God, I believe what you are saying to me. I believe you. It's also an act of obedience. Because if we say that I'm responding in trust to who God is, that means we have to obey him. You know why we have to obey him? Because he's a lot bigger than we are. Well, that's part of it. It's because he's God. He created us. And he's perfect love. We'll get to that in the second part of the class about who God is. So, we choose in trust and obedience to give ourselves to God. Look at this second line here. By faith, we give ourselves to God through Jesus Christ and in the Holy Spirit. And faith not only involves the will, it involves our mind too. So really, if you wanted to match these two things up, obedience goes with which one? Will. Trust goes with which one? More or less. I mean, they both go with each, but if you want to put them. So why is the intellect involved? Because we have to believe what he tells us about himself. Right? That he's a good God. And, well, again, I'm going to get into that in the second part of the class. Look at the next part. We believe by faith what God has revealed, even if we don't fully understand it. Nobody fully understands everything that God has revealed. That's okay. It's okay to say I don't fully. I'm a priest of the church and I don't fully understand the Eucharist. I understand a lot of it, but I don't fully understand it. Because it's an infinite reality, an infinite mystery. So it's okay to say I don't fully understand something about God. We believe what God has revealed, even if we don't fully understand. Faith is a personal commitment to God. Faith is a relationship. It is our response to God's love. So by your being here, those of you especially who are going to be baptized, this is the real moment, or getting ready for the real moment, please God, of saying this to God. That I am giving my life to you. That I am assenting in trust and obedience to what you have revealed. Now, for those of you who are already baptized and hoping to move into the fullness of the Catholic Church, what you are saying by being here is that I want to deepen this in the fullness of the Catholic faith. Okay. Any questions about that half? You guys are so quiet. All right, second part. Faith is something we receive. Faith is a gift of God. Okay? It's not like you all or me woke up one morning and said, okay, God, here I am. I'm ready to be saved. No. God works first. God always works first. God drew you. Even before you thought about thinking about responding to Him, God reached out to you first. And that is why it's right to say that faith is something we receive. It is a gift. Let's keep going down the list here. God's grace infuses us with belief. It is free. There's nothing you can do to earn it. God gives it to you freely. Number 3, it must grow and be nurtured. This is a real fallacy among, I don't want to pick on the poor non-Catholics, but this is a real fallacy among some groups of non-Catholics, that they think that faith or being saved is a one-time only deal. In a sense it is, but in another sense it's not. Because faith can die. See, it's not just like you get saved and that's it. You know, you receive the grace of salvation and that can die on the vine. Or it can grow and be nurtured. Okay, so that's the third point. And even further, number 4 there, it can be lost altogether through carelessness and sin. Finally, number 5, faith is attacked from within and from without. Cheery, cheery. The reason I say this is because this is something that we need to be realistic about. Okay, we can't. When we have the gift of faith and we responded in grace to God, to faith in God, we can't stand still because, you know, it'll die on the vine through carelessness and it gets attacked. We all know that. We live with it every day. How does it get attacked? It gets attacked from in us because we're selfish people, right? We want things that we shouldn't want a lot of times. It gets attacked from without because of the sin of the world. You know, other people tell us God doesn't exist, or other people tell us the Catholic Church is all screwy, or, you know, why do you follow this teaching? As, you know, modern teaching about, the Catholic teaching about marriage is silly, blah, 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 blah. You know, it's attacked from all angles. And unless our faith is growing, what will happen to that faith as it gets pummeled by all these rocks? It will die. Okay. So, faith is something we do. Faith is something we receive. God gives us the gift of faith and we respond to it. So in summary, we're going to have a break here at 1:45 because they're going to ring the bell and it's going to become a circus here in a minute with all these kids. Faith is a loving relationship with God. That's the bottom line. Faith is a loving relationship with God. So do you see why it's both things? Something that we receive and something that we do? Because that's the nature of a relationship. Giving and taking, back and forth. You see, it's God's part and our part together. So it would be, again, to use the analogy of marriage. In marriage, marriage is something that you do, and marriage is something that you receive, right, from your spouse. So it's the same with God and faith. This is just both parts of the relationship. Faith is both a personal relationship and one that is within the church. And these aspects are inseparable. You cannot have faith outside of the church. Now, let me qualify that. People who do genuinely have faith and maybe aren't within the visible bounds of the church, their faith is still somewhat within the church. You see what I'm saying? Even though they think they might be an island, you follow what I'm saying, and sort of individually on their own, their faith is still connected with the church invisibly, because a person's faith and the faith of the church cannot be separated. They're one and the same. This is what the Catechism says. And by the way, whenever you see that little mark there, CCC, that's what it means. It means Catechism of the Catholic Church. That's this big book. And usually I put the number in there, yeah, 181. All the paragraphs in here are marked off by number. So 181 would be paragraph 181. You don't have to look it up now, but you can look it up later to see how it works. So this is what the church says about this. The church's faith precedes, that means comes before, engenders, that means brings about, supports, you know what that means, and nourishes our faith. Okay, so, you know, this little guy here who has faith, whatever faith he has is, you know, within the faith of the church. You can't, you know, go out in the woods and have faith on your own. Faith comes within the church. Now, some people are more or less visibly connected to the church, as I said before, but nonetheless it's in the church. The church is the mother of all believers. And St. Cyprian, the next quote, who was a bishop way back in the time again, with Augustine and Ambrose and all those guys, actually a little before that, said this: "No one can have God as Father who does not have the church as mother. Faith in Jesus Christ is necessary for salvation, for without faith it is impossible to please God." And that comes from St. Paul. Mary, the mother of Jesus, is the perfect model for us of faith. She shows us what it means to receive this gift from God and to respond to it fully. And we're going to talk a lot more about Mary, the mother of Jesus, in future classes. So we'll just hold on that. I just wanted to throw that in for now. Okay. Whew, I'm throwing a lot at you tonight. Questions? Thoughts? David?
You have a great phrase that you speak of when we talk about God being a first responder and God calling us and us responding.
Yes.
And
what's my phrase?
The divine dance.
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah, that's a Benedictine thing. That the Benedictines describe this life of faith as a divine dance. Like, that is, that we're dancing with God. Now, somebody's got to lead, right? When you dance, and who leads? God leads, right? And if you don't let God lead, what's going to happen? You're going to fall on your face. Yeah. So God leads, and we respond, and back and forth, and that's our vow. Okay, so have some snacks. There's some coffee and some other stuff. Serve Him. We've talked about how God reveals Himself, right? First through the Old Testament, then fully in Jesus. And that full revelation is shown to us through the church, especially through sacred tradition and sacred scripture. And now we ask the question, what? What does God reveal about Himself? Well, first of all, this is a long list. And this isn't all of it, but it's a good start. God reveals that He is one. God is one. Now, what does this refer to? Well, this means one versus the many gods of the pagans. So when God reveals this, who does He reveal it to? Does anybody remember? Anybody know? He reveals it to the Israelites, right? So in the Old Testament, God reveals that He is one. And the situation in the time of the Israelites was that every people, every different kind of people, believed that there were many gods. Okay, all the pagans, the Canaanites believed all that. We know all the Egyptians did. Later the Romans would. If you go to the Eastern religions, you know, Hinduism, whatever, you know, it wasn't Hinduism yet, but, you know, all the different peoples believed in many gods, that there were many gods. So God reveals, shows that there aren't many gods. There is only one God. There is only one God. And this is believed today by the Jewish people, by Muslims, and by Christians. And that's pretty much it, actually. You know, pretty much everybody else believes in many gods, although Buddhism is kind of a strange thing, because I suppose you could kind of say they believe in one God, but their belief in one God is so far skewed from what God really is that you can't even really call it that. Okay?